That was the night something tall stepped into the shallows, lifted the end of my stringer like it belonged to it and not me, took the top pickerel off of it in one smooth motion, and then made sure I understood that shoreline did not belong to me. You can call me Mark. I live in eastern Manitoba, and if I've got a free evening in May or June, I'm usually somewhere along the Whiteshell River with a rod, a 5-gallon bucket for a seat, and a small lantern for some light. I'm not a hunter, and I didn't have any preconceived ideas about Bigfoot. I didn't have any kinds of ideas about Bigfoot at all, really. What I'm about to tell you happened in June 2022. The first warm stretch after the black flies had eased up. That was the night something tall stepped into the shallows, lifted the end of my stringer like it belonged to it and not me, took the top pickerel off of it in one smooth motion, and then made sure I understood that shoreline didn't belong to me. The spot is a little back bay off the Whiteshell River, and there's no dock, no campsite, just a granite point with jack pines leaning all over like a bunch of old men, and there's a ribbon of ankle-deep sand where the current tucks in. I parked at the end of a sandy service road around 8:30 p.m., last light still hanging in the tops of the pines. There was no wind to speak of. The river looked like green glass with a slow slide to it. I brought one medium-light spinning rod rigged with a 1/4-ounce jig and a white twister tail, and a small propane lantern, the old Coleman style that throws a warm halo without turning the night into a bright stadium. I also brought a cheap headlamp, a stringer of the braided cord type with metal clips, and a thermos of coffee. The plan was simple. Try for 2 eater-sized pickerels, then be back at the truck before the coyotes cut loose. There were no other vehicles at the pullout, and I didn't hear any voices on the way in. The granite was still warm where the sun had been on it all day. A loon called somewhere up the river, and I could hear, far off, one tail slap from a beaver and the low ripple of the river gliding by. I set the lantern on a flattish rock behind me and turned it low. The light puts your shadow on the water, and sometimes the fish don't like that. But that place is shallow enough that they nose in anyway. I cast up current, let the jig swing and tumble, then picked up just enough slack to feel that ta-ta-ta of a curious fish tapping on the rubber. Third cast. Well, I had my supper. It was the kind of pickerel that fits just nice in a pan, about 7 inches. 10 minutes later, I had his twin. I clipped both of them by the lower lip, slid them down the stringer, and tied the end to the point of a rock that sits right where the sand starts. The fish faced upstream, white bellies flashing a little every time they flexed against the current. I know from experience that flash can bring trouble if there's any trouble around. I've had snapping turtles come in like heavy gangsters intent to take my fish. I've also had otters trying to look cute and distract me while they took a couple quick bites. But I've never had what I had that night. I told myself I'd give it another hour and see if I could get one more pickerel. I poured my last cup of coffee, sat back down on my bucket, and let the river sound put me into a peaceful place. The first odd thing was the quiet. I don't mean the normal night silence. This was different. The mosquitoes were still whining around the lantern, but the bird chatter, the kind that normally trails off through the evening like some slow slide of a dimmer switch, that suddenly cut off. Even the frog on the far bank shut up. If you fish long enough alone, you'll get sensitive to the night changes the same way you can smell a storm before it hits. Right then a small stone landed in the water off to my left. Not a plop from a fish jump. This was a straight-line skip and sink, like a kid had pitched it from the darkness. I lifted the headlamp off my neck. Then I thought about it. The toss came from the tree line, just beyond the lantern's reach, maybe 15 yards. I figured, must be a raccoon. They tend to pick things up, everything they can, inspect it, and then they drop or toss it when they're done. Maybe it was right there by the water and had tossed it there. When I turned the headlamp that way, I didn't aim it high. I kept it low, threw a stripe of red light across the sand just to see if any eyeshine winked back. None did. I went back to the rod. A few minutes later, the smell came. Now, people describe this smell every which way you can imagine, but I'll tell you how it came to me. It was a wet dog smell with the sourness of old body sweat and a high, sharp note to it, like the ozone when you're too close to an electrical panel. It wasn't overpowering. It drifted, thinned out on the air, and then drifted back in full force. It came to me from the right, downwind of me, according to the little bit of breeze that had already started. I told myself, black bear. We've had them nosing in and around dumps and knocking over bird feeders since I was a kid. They didn't bother me. I said, "Hey, bear," in a loud and steady voice. Right then, the lantern dimmed for just a half second like the pressure dropped in the fuel. Then it came back to full life. I glanced to check the fuel gauge. It was fine, and the mantle was steady. A minute later, the two fish on the stringer gave a unified kick and then went still. I looked toward the white flash in the water and saw something dark move at the very edge of the lantern's glow. I strained my eyes to see past that into the darkness. Something big had stepped into the very shallowest part of the bay, just about ankle deep. I heard the solid water sound as it stepped in. No splashing, just solid water as the foot came down. My brain was now back on the black bear train for about 3 seconds. Then the shape blew that idea apart. Even when it's low light and all you get is the hint of a bear, they look a certain way. A rounded shoulder, a muzzle if you catch it side on, and there's a way of moving that's all shoulder and low hip. This shape was not like that. This hip was high, the leg long, and when it leaned toward the stringer, the arm that reached out had an elbow joint in the wrong place. Unless it wasn't a bear. Unless it was, well, the hand. The hand. It closed on the braided stringer line 2 feet above the clip. This was a firm grip, not a paw swipe. It lifted the clips clear of the sand and the current with a little tug that set each fish to flaring their gills and tightening their bodies. Then, with the same motion that you or I would use, it slid its other hand down the line and popped the top fish off the clip with a simple twist. I stood up without meaning to, and the bucket kicked out behind me. The hand froze on the stringer. The whole shape turned its torso, not just its head, but it turned its whole torso toward me and presented that big chest the way a man would in a bar to show you don't want to be starting something with him. In the turning, the face came into the lantern's half light. I didn't get a Hollywood shot of eyes and teeth, but I got the side of a broad face with a heavy brow, a flatness to the nose, a strong jawline, and hair that lay down close and tight to the skin. Then I heard a low, chesty exhale that rolled across the water, and it put my heart 2 inches higher in my chest. It didn't sound natural to my ears. I can't say what I was thinking at that moment, but I popped out with, "I'll go." I didn't say, "Hey, bear," that time. I said, "I'll go," like I had been caught trespassing. I meant I was going to go, and he could have anything he wanted. There'd be no arguments from me. The shape stopped for a second, like it was thinking about what I had said. Then it pulled the top fish completely free, then stepped sideways out of the lantern's light toward the birch clump that anchors the inside of the bay. I then heard a low teeth-clicking sound, like 2 smooth stones touching again and again, and then the sound of water running off like you stepped out of a bath. The second fish bumped the rock as the line settled and rolled weakly in the water. I tightened my grip on my rod handle. I took 1 step back. The lantern threw my shadow long on the water, and the shadow crossed the place where the Bigfoot now stood. For some reason, that made my scalp go tight in a way I don't know how to really explain. From the trees uphill and to my left, maybe 30 yards, came a series of several short whistles, all in different pitches. I flinched, even though it wasn't close. The Bigfoot near me, standing at the birches, didn't answer. Instead, there was a quiet-like groan, the sound of a live tree being flexed at the base and then slowly let go. The birch nearest the water bowed and popped a little at the root collar. I saw the trunk move, and I saw the unsettling shape of a hand do it. A hand was on that birch, 5 feet above my own reach. The smell was thicker now. Wet dog, body sweat, bite of ozone. I felt it in my nose and behind my teeth. The Bigfoot moved again with a sidestep that put it wholly behind the birches where the lantern couldn't throw light. I heard the light crunch of birch catkins underfoot and the gentle impact of something heavy setting its heel and then its forefoot on sand. I'm saying heel because, well, that's how the impression looked the next day. But at that moment, there was only moving darkness and a ring of light that would only go so far. I took 3 steps back. The bucket bumped my calf. I thought about my truck. I thought of the long, narrow trail back to it. I thought of how that trail threads through thick scrub where something tall and massive could be almost right beside you in the dark, and you might not know it. I thought of my wife and how I did not want to be in one of that guy's missing 411 books. The fish on the stringer twitched again, and the braided line slid, seesawing against the rock. From behind the birch I heard a closed-mouthed huff. Then there came a slap to my right, like someone threw a fist-sized rock into the water 2 feet beyond where my lantern's shadow lay. No idea what that really was. So I said louder, "Okay, I'm leaving. Just take it," I said. I meant the fish, or maybe the cove, maybe the whole dang valley. I didn't care. Just take it, dude. I'm out. I grabbed the lantern with my left hand, had my rod in my right, and I backed up until my heels felt the start of lichen and roots where the granite stopped and the forest ground started. The light moved with me, lighting the birches as I moved along and leaving them black when I moved past them. As I backed out, a tall shape became a silhouette in the darkness for 1 clean second against the lighter seam of water beyond. I saw the slope of shoulder, the forward set of the head, the jut of the jaws, and the long arm that held my fish. The shoulder flexed once, and then that shape was lost in the darkness again. I got to the top of the little rise where the trail starts, and I did something that I'm still not sure was really a smart thing to do. I put the lantern down on a rock on the trail mouth. I turned it up another notch so it threw out more light across the sand and into the trees. I couldn't bring myself to kill the lantern and go into full darkness. I knew it only pinpointed where I was, but I just couldn't do without the light. I shouldered my pack that I had barely used, put my rod back under my arm, picked up the lantern, and started down the path. It's maybe 200 meters to the truck, with 3 little jogs through some scrub, and then a spot where the trail skirts a clump of old spruce. The escort started at the second jog. Leaf litter isn't loud unless there's some weight on it. The steps I heard were deep, steady, just to my right and slightly behind me. The night was so still, the footfalls had clear sound and shape. Heel, forefoot, then nothing for the beat that it takes to place the next step. Repeat. It was at that point that I prayed that if I made it to my truck, that I did not have a wreck on my way home, because my underwear were no longer clean. A low, throaty rumble came from the right. I felt it as much as heard it. I kept my steps even and kept going, telling myself every step is 1 more step closer to the truck and to getting out of there. At the spruce clump, I heard the footsteps to the side of me quicken, and I thought, oh boy, this is it. It's making its move. I almost froze. Then the steps passed me and went ahead, maybe 10 feet in front. I was still moving in that direction, though more slowly, when I saw a hand push through a strip of spruce boughs up ahead. The tips flicked forward the way spruce does when something bends it and then lets it go. I saw a flash of fur in the lantern's light, which barely touched the shape. There was a dark but recognizable shape. Fingers, thumb, long. The hand withdrew almost immediately, like the owner remembered it wasn't trying to touch me, just showing me which way I was supposed to go. The second set of whistles came then, forward of me and left, like some checkpoint that I was walking toward. I couldn't tell if those whistles were for me or my big furry escort. Maybe for both. I reached the little sand pocket right before the last 50 yards to my truck, and the Bigfoot moved closer than it had all night without stepping right onto the trail with me. It paralleled me at maybe a few feet behind the buckbrush. Close enough I saw the darkness and flashes behind the leaves. I heard breathing and little grunts as it walked. The smell went high again. Ozone, sweat, musk. I have to thank the United States Army for teaching me that I can do things under stress even when I think I can't or don't want to do them. I was never in combat, don't mistake me, so I'd never had to put any of that training to test, not until that night. But it was incredible how decades-old discipline kicked right in to keep me moving toward my objective, no matter what was going on around me. The trail lifted into the clearing where the truck sat, looking like some foreign alien object. I fumbled the key fob out of my pocket, keeping a death grip on it. All I could think of was how in the movies, this is where someone is stupid and drops their car key in the darkness, and that's what gets them killed. But I got the fob out, hit the unlock button, grateful and startled at the same time by the flashing lights at the front of the truck. I tossed my rod carefully in the back of the truck and got in the truck with the lantern still lit. Then I shut the door. Then I turned the lantern out. I had my hand on the start button, and I stopped. I was watching and listening, waiting for it to come out of the darkness. I waited for maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Then I told myself, this is stupid. This wasn't some game like when we were kids and the whole object was to scare ourselves. This was real, and I needed to leave. I hit the start button on that truck, and I told myself to go buy my wife something really nice when I got home. You see, until 2021, the year before, I was still driving a 1992 Ford Ranger, and it had been nothing but trouble the last 5 or 6 years that I had it, costing me more money than you would ever believe. Never started when I needed it to. Broke down at the drop of a hat. I was replacing something on it, it seemed like, every month. But I just couldn't pull the trigger on the price of a new truck, not even a used one, which the Ranger was when I bought it in 2000. Anyway, my wife was getting fed up with it all. She sat me down and she started talking numbers. She does all the finances, you see. Well, she added up what the Ranger had been costing me over the last year or two, and she all but took me by the business end of a shotgun down to the dealership, and I bought this brand new Ford. Only new truck I've ever bought in my life. And I'm not lying when I tell you, I was so thankful for that smooth ignition of that strong engine when it rumbled to life, just at the touch of a button. I am not the kind to spend lots of money, but I did go buy my wife a new chicken coop and some new breeds of chickens she'd been wanting. Trust me, that was better than diamonds to her. But let me get on with the story. Anyhow, I hit that ignition button, and sweet relief flooded all through me as it roared to life. And the world outside the truck was now lit up with those super bright LED headlights like a football stadium. I put the truck in gear and took my foot off the brake. But just before I could put my foot on the gas pedal, I saw something flash by the side of the truck in the darkness. Then I felt something nudge or bump the whole truck, but I wasn't sure where. I wasn't getting out to go look for it. I hit the gas pedal, and I threw dirt and rocks getting out of there. I didn't breathe easy till I was in my own house, had showered, and eased into bed next to my sleeping wife. I pulled her close, and I said a lot of prayers. Sleep was a long time coming that night. I couldn't help myself. In the morning, I woke up thinking about it. I'm pretty sure I had been dreaming about it, too. I had to know. So I was going back at first light. Over breakfast, I told my wife matter of fact what happened. Now, my wife's a pretty serious woman, and she believed me, and I knew she would. I told her I was going back to look for evidence and to just make sure that someone hadn't left evidence and maybe they pulled a prank on me. I just had to see and know in the daylight. She listened, she nodded, and she simply asked, "Well, who you taking with you?" I looked at her like she just grew a second head. "Who am I taking with me? What?" I guess my blank stare said it all, because she went on to say she knew she didn't marry the county idiot, and that she knew I wasn't going back there alone without someone watching my six, because she had an expensive chicken habit and she needed me around to purchase all of that for her. Now, don't get upset. That's my wife's humor, folks. That's just her way of saying, "I love you and I'm worried." I knew what she meant. And that comment is exactly what made me get that new coop and more chickens. But that's another story. I knew my wife was right, though. Just because nothing had happened to me the night before, that didn't mean it would be the same that day. Maybe something was about to happen to me last night, and I avoided it somehow. I knew my wife was right. She usually is. Just don't you dare tell her I said so. Anyway, I called my brother Dan, and I asked him to meet me at the pull-out. He's a practical type of guy who thinks the world is exactly as you see it and nothing more. We met, and I briefly told him exactly what happened. Like my wife, he listened, he nodded, and then together we walked down to where it all happened. The sand in the bay there will keep prints only if the water cooperates, and it had so far overnight. The braided stringer line was still tied to the rock, trailing into the shallows with that one lone fish still looking on it for the worse wear. In the sand, right by the end of the stringer, I found a heel-to-toe print. Not crisp like some fancy plaster-cast photo, but clear and identifiable. The heel cup was deep, deeper than mine when I stood next to it, bouncing on my heel with all my weight as hard as I could to sink into the sand. I still didn't get near as deep as that heel cup impression. The forefoot spread wide with toes splayed, 5 of them, no claw points, just thick pads that pushed the sand outward. I set my size 12 boot next to it. The impression ran a hand longer. Call it 16, 17 inches maybe. Another print sat one stride away where something heavy had pivoted slightly to reach the stringer end. Up by the birch clump, 2 scuffed ovals in the dirt showed where something big had shifted weight from one foot to the other. On the peeled spot where the birch had bowed the night before, a long, coarse hair hung 3 inches from a ragged splinter. Dark brown with a reddish cast where the low sun got into it. We didn't touch it. Dan took out his phone and started to say something about bear guard hair. He's skinned a few bear and a lot of other deer and animals, so he does know hair. But then he suddenly stopped, and he didn't even bother to finish his sentence. I showed Dan the place where the spruce tips were disturbed at shoulder height and the strip of boughs that had flicked forward when the hand came through. He stood there absorbing and said, "If that was a guy in a suit, he's 7'10" at least with a ladder, and he's got a union card for the Screen Actors Guild." Then he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Brother, you were not alone out here last night." We took a few photos, the kind you only show to someone if they already want to believe, because if they don't already believe, they're going to tell you every reason the sand and the wood in the photos look like whatever story you're trying to tell, and why it's all wrong. That's fine. I wasn't gathering evidence for a court case. I was gathering things for me. I cut the last fish loose. I watched it struggle to remember what to do free in the water, but I think it was just too weak by then. I saw a gull made a breakfast out of it not long after I set it loose. I took the stringer line and clipped it back into the mesh on my 5-gallon bucket. I didn't fish that cove for several weeks. The first night I went back, I didn't bring a lantern. I used the headlamp only when I had to. and I kept it pointed down. But I made a point of leaving early that night, too. Fished fast, kept my stringer on the shore until I was ready to go. And like I said, I left sooner than I normally did. I'm not saying I was terrified or too scared to fish. I'm saying I'm a man who can learn when he's been taught a lesson. And I believe I had definitely been given a lesson. In the time since, a few small things that echo that night have happened. Twice I've heard a single whistle right up the ridge, right at dusk. Now, it could have been someone whistling up to their dog or to signal another partner in the woods. But what I heard didn't have the sound or feel to it. One night, just as I was packing up to go, a few stones plopped into the water a few feet out in front of me. They came in over me, arched high. I didn't see the first one, but I saw the second and third. Thankfully, it wasn't where I had to make my exit. Now, I know what people are going to ask, so I'll give you some straight answers. Did I see the face full on? No, I just saw the side of one. I saw the brow was heavy, the nose didn't point out like a bear's long snout, and the mouth corner was in shadows. Eye shine? No, not with the lantern light the way it was. I didn't catch any kind of eye flash. The head sat forward on the shoulders, though, in a way that would look very unnatural on a man. How tall was it? 7-something, I'd say, probably closer to 8. I'm 6 feet tall. When the shape stepped between me and the water, it blacked out all of the evening light that I could see. I saw where the hand came out from the strip of boughs. It was very high. Even Dan said 7 foot plus easy, and from all the indicators I gave him, he and I both agreed it was closer to 8 feet. Now, how scared was I? Well, that's a little complicated. I think it's more right to say that I had fear of the unknown and fear in a situation that I didn't think I was in full control of. That still doesn't tell the full story, though. There was a stretch where I felt what was a careful, controlled fear. It was like if you've ever had to pass a bull moose in shoulder-high willow, and you kind of look at each other the whole time warily. You're hoping your luck holds and you can slide by. It's like that. Do I think it was out to get me? No, it didn't directly threaten or charge me, so I don't think so. But maybe that is how a Bigfoot does things. Does anyone really know how a Bigfoot does things? If it wanted to take me for whatever reason, can anyone out there say with 100% verified certainty of how it would go about doing that? Maybe flanking and hurting its prey until they're exhausted or confused is part of the process. Maybe I just got to my truck before it made its final move. I'll never know, and I don't ever want to know. Now, did I call anybody about this? No, I told 2 people, my wife and my brother. That was enough. There wasn't much there by the next day to even see, so what was the point? Who would I call anyway? Besides, I didn't want a convoy of people out there turning a beautiful, quiet place into a mess. Do I still fish at night? Yes, but I really never go alone now. I keep my fish in the bucket until I'm done. When I do use a stringer, I tie it short and close, and I check the birches on the way in, pretending I'm not doing that. If you read this on your channel, Nance, please tell folks I'm not out to convert non-believers or compete with anyone else's encounter story. That seems to be what I hear a lot of on these kinds of channels nowadays. I just want it on record that once on a windless June night in the Whiteshell, something tall with long arms and a hand like a big catcher's mitt took one of the fish off my stringer, then made sure I got in my truck with a message I will never forget. I could give you the GPS pin on this exact location, but again, I don't want 500 people up here traipsing around by this weekend. And the photos we took, well, they just didn't photograph well. I know what I'm looking at, but no one else can make heads or tails out of it, so I don't bother to share them. Thanks for the time, and thanks for how you read these. You have a way of keeping the story feeling true. Signed, Mark from Manitoba. All right, y'all, listen, that's all I really have for you tonight. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because, well, I know life is really busy for us all right now, and it's about to get a whole lot busier with the holidays coming. I really appreciate that you stayed with me to the end. We're going to have to do a sit and chit chat one night soon. Maybe a live stream. You know what? How about we do that? Why don't you send me any questions you might have for a live stream that I can answer, and we'll set one up. What day? Heck, I don't know. I'll decide in the next couple of days and announce it. Probably maybe Thanksgiving weekend. We all seem to maybe have a little time, maybe that Saturday or Sunday. Anyway, tell me what you think in the comments below, what might be a good day. And I guess that's all I got for you tonight. You know what I'm going to say though, right? Until we meet up again, folks, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.